This video explains the need for border security, the need to fight the drug war, nuclear proliferation, and black market weapons-grade uranium cells. All of that is not necessarily in that order, but all of it will be covered to explain why our counter-narcotics programs are so important, why our border security programs are so important, and what might happen if we didn't have those programs. What might happen is basically the smoking gun, the mushroom cloud that could appear over New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Chicago, Austin, Cambridge, and Boston. New York is the financial center of the country. It's the New York Stock Exchange. It's Broadway. It's the World Trade Center. It's all those financial it's almost all of our financial stock market activity when it comes to the New York Stock Exchange, the big board, our biggest blue chip companies, right? A lot of the processing is over there in New Jersey, where they have the supercomputers and the high-speed computing services that do program trades, right? That they do call high-frequency trades sometimes, or program trades. They program in the trades the night before, and they teach the computer what they want it to do, and then in the morning it does a bunch of stuff. And they would probably try to nuke something like that, or nuke the connection between that and Wall Street, and really crush our markets. They hit Chicago. They hit the Commodity Board of Trade, right, where we trade agricultural products and commodities like oil, natural gas, or something like that, and the futures market. They have futures in New York and futures in Chicago. And of course the NASDAQ seems to be, in some respects, a little bit safer because you have market makers around the country. This is the economic impact of what a nuclear weapon might do, is to cripple some trading activity, and it could take some time before we recover in that respect. When it comes to people, there are about 12 million people in New York and about 20 million in the metropolitan statistical area, which is a larger area that includes Newark and stuff like that. So that's what they call sometimes the bridge and tunnel crowd, and it's the New York plus model of population. Metropolitan statistical areas are larger than just a city. It includes suburbs and things like that, if you want to look at it that way. Sometimes they call it the hinterland or something, the land in between the hinterland, the country, and the city. The suburbs and the surrounding industrial areas sometimes. It's important to have a city. They're what they call, Porter calls, and Harvard he calls it the agglomeration economies, where you need a certain level of activity and a certain kind of there's these interdependencies that are developed between different types of businesses that support economic development and growth in a city. So you get blight when you don't have critical factors in those inputs to industry or services. And you need people to buy those services that can be sometimes in that market or in other markets, depending on their distribution model and what type of services they're offering. Could be online, could be over the phone, call center, things like that. Could be software distribution over the internet. It depends on what you create in your city. But a nuclear bomb is a low-yield nuclear weapon could destroy Manhattan, or a larger bomb could destroy a larger area. If they snuck it up into a building, they'd get something closer to an airburst if they got it to the top of a skyscraper. So building security is pretty important. they would probably want to find that skyscraper that has the worst security, right? So they're looking for the fault lines, the weak point, and they would want to do that. And people say, well, it's unimaginable that someone could get a nuclear weapon into this country or the nuclear materials into this country. And if you follow my LinkedIn page, you'll note an old article I created, an old video where I explain how you could kind of get a nuclear weapon going with money from drug sales. Now, if you pay attention to the news, you'll see that recently they had a very large bust in New Jersey of what, $60 million worth of cocaine, powdered cocaine, I guess, in kilos, in a truck that was supposed to be dried fruit. Now the ships and the submarines come into Florida, and we've had a bust here at $250 million within the last year. Over in California, they say one hit $500 million. And that's street value. That's not how much a cocaine trafficker's going to make. He's selling it to somebody at $20,000 to $30,000 a kilo. And what they're saying in street value is more like $100,000 or $120,000 per kilo. That's not the markup that a dealer makes in Colombia, you know, a trafficker. That's the markup that a street thug makes when he converts it to cold hard cash by stamping on it if it's powder and going from 1 kilo to 2 kilo by using an inert agent, something that doesn't affect the cocaine but it weakens it, right? It's just powder, it's going up their nose, and it's just not going to be as strong. It's not going to be it'll be less desirable to some people, and some people don't mind. They didn't want to get too much of a rush anyway, so wanted something that wasn't so powerful. But some people are into a real powerful high and a real euphoric, powerful. They want to get amped up. There are a lot of people use this stuff. It's not just the thug life and the drug life in the hood. There are stockbrokers and businessmen and women who do it, housewives, kids, all kinds of people use drugs. Addiction is a serious issue, and that's not the issue I'm talking about. Obviously, there are concerns about 70,000 people dying of opioid deaths and things like that have nothing to do with nuclear weapons. They only have, they're like an externality of an illegal substance being sold on a black market. What is an externality? It's a negative externality, by the way. It's some other effect that's not so economic, right? Yeah, there's an economic cost of addiction in terms of counseling and treatment and incarceration. All those are the economic effects. The externality is the loss, the grief, things that you can't calculate economically. If my understanding of externality is correct. This is a long time since I got my degree in economics. But what I say is I'm talking about this, the threat of nuclear terror on American soil is my biggest concern, not the economics. But what it is you get cocaine in, say, the Dominican Republic. It costs $3,500 a kilo, right? So if you can get it into Florida, you can make $16,500 in Miami for selling at $20,000 a kilo, right? And some people would shoot the guy once they get the $16,000 and resell it again. That is one of the externalities for the buyer, right? Is he's going to die and doesn't know it. He's just going to give away some money and die. There are some unscrupulous people involved in trafficking. It's kind of like the movie in the 80s of Tony Montana, and he was the big cocaine guy. He cut people up with chainsaws and all that in Miami. That was back during what, Mariel, the boat left from Cuba, right? They brought all the felons in and they wanted to run the cocaine business, and some cop down there called them the cocaine cowboys. In Colombia, they build submarines out in the desert. If you have an interest, you can go online and look up Nat Geo, which is National Geographic, DEA submarine hunter or submarines or something like that. And there's a nice hour plus 2 hour movie on the hunt for submarines. And there's a lot of landmines out there. More people get hit with landmines in Colombia than anywhere else in the world, is what they say in the video. What I would tell you though is you can load a lot of drugs on a submarine. And if they can sneak a mini sub or some kind of surface skimming sub into the country with cocaine, other people can sneak into the country or sneak into our waters like the Iranians, who have diesel boats that are a little more advanced than the Colombian boats, right? So the Russians probably no problem getting one of their, what do they call them, Akutas or something in from Cuba or somewhere. They wouldn't have a problem getting into our waters, right? And the Iranians wouldn't, but that's not what I'm talking about either. What I'm talking about is drug smuggling to finance black market uranium purchases, right? So to put it in perspective, you make $16,500 on 1 kilo. Now obviously there's different prices around the country for 1 kilo. It's easier to get in Miami than it is in Fort Pierce, which is a 2 hours north of Miami, right? Why? Well, there's, it's just harder to get it up here. You get it into Miami, but then you got to move it up the turnpike or up I-95, or you got to put it on a boat and take it in again. It's a lot more risk coming in this way. So some people don't want to come in this way anymore either. So it's 30,000 here, right? The risk-reward relationship holds in terms of the geographic market development, or whatever you want to think of it as, right? Is there's more risk in Fort Pierce, so it costs more, and it's more costs or more risks that lead to higher costs, right? So you get 16.5. What can you buy on the black market in terms of uranium for 16.5? Almost 2 grams of uranium. The uranium's, according to open source information that I retrieve through a Google search, through people who are doing research into this, they're able to buy uranium for $10,000 a gram. Well, how much uranium do you need for a bomb? According to the Bellflower Center, which is at Harvard, and some other open source information, it's pretty consistent. They say you need close to 12 pounds, and 12 pounds is 5 kilograms, right? Because 2.214 something 37 or something like that is how many kilograms is, how many pounds is in a kilogram. And so in 1 kilogram there's 1,000 grams. So to get to the bomb you need 5,000 grams of uranium, weapons grade uranium, right? Because just plain old uranium doesn't work. What comes out of the ground is uranium, right? It's abundant all over the world, and then they process that ore into yellow cake, right? And it used to be yellow cake, but the processing is different now, and it's not yellow anymore. It's a rust color. But it used to be yellow, and so they called it yellow cake, and that takes you on your path to a product that can be used as a fuel in a reactor, or I guess you can go down the path where you would try to convert it to an enriched product, right, that can be used for weapons manufacturing. So you need something that's at least 60% pure to be weapons grade. America uses 91, 92, 93, something like that for our weapons, right? We've got high quality weapons that will work. Will they work at 60%? Sure, and you need good engineers to figure out how to do that. And we definitely secure our weapons and our waste, because waste could be converted into what they need for a nuclear weapon. So the power plant security is important. We don't want terrorists going over the wall over there and grabbing things. We don't want employees walking off the base. I call them bases, but they're power plants, but they're just like bases, right? They're like nuclear weapons bases. They're like nuclear materials bases. Whatever you think, there's a lot of storage for spent fuel. So we don't reprocess the fuel and reuse it on the plant like French do. And because that also leads to enrichment, but we let it cool down, and that takes 7, 8, 10 years to cool down. Once it cools down, we can ship it to Yucca Mountain, but people don't like it going through Texas cattle country and Kansas wheat fields and Iowa cornfields and what else? Nebraska cornfields. They don't want the nuclear waste to fall off the train out there somewhere and contaminate their corn, or they use corn for feed for cattle and stuff and other animals. They don't want to screw up our feed. They don't want to screw up our food. And people are averse to that. They don't want that train going through there in the middle of the night and not knowing what's going to happen in the middle of the night. They don't even like chemicals going through in some towns, But, so it sits out a lot of nuclear plants, and it's a big security risk, right? That's why we have a lot of ex-special ops, ex-combat arms, people with combat experience working police force and community where they have nuclear power, right? That's important. But that's not the topic of this discussion, this lecture, this informative YouTube video. The purpose of this is to explain black market uranium and how easy it would be to acquire enough money if you had the financial reward of smuggling large quantity of drugs in the United States, like some of the cartels and terrorist groups who want to collaborate with the cartels, right? They want to invest in the product in a place like the Bahamas or Dominican Republic at $3,500 and make that $16,500, right? So how many kilos do you have to sell to get 5,000 grams? Well, at $10,000 a gram, you need $50 million. Additionally, you're going to need some engineering. You need some parts, right? Because a nuclear bomb is not just nuclear materials, right? I would say you need 25 million in parts and 25 million in engineering. Why? It's what I alluded to at the beginning and didn't explain. At Georgia Tech, they picked up on my article and did some research, and they've come up with a little bit of analysis. And there's an Asian guy, I think he's Korean, and he said that you can create most of the parts and print them out with 3D printing. I'm not sure if you can do everything, but the fabrication of parts is easier because of 3D printing, is what was clear in his thesis and what he proved. And you can design things overseas. You can steal ideas from here, send them there, design them, print a prototype using a 3D printer, and you can fabricate the part much faster and easier, in the backyard, basically, here in America. Once you design everything, you bring in the thumb drive with all the information you need, and you get the right 3D printing, commercial kind of industrial 3D printing and other machining tools and stuff, and you can spit out the parts you need. What do you need for a nuclear weapon? The pipe is pretty easy. I call it the pipe. It's called a gun-type nuclear weapon. It's where you have a source at each end of a pipe, and then you propel them towards the center with explosives. And that's a simple design that's pretty guaranteed to work. And everybody knows that. It's common knowledge for quite some time that the bomb they tested at Los Alamos was less likely to work. And it was called the Trinity test, and it was an implosion device, not a bomb. But they put it up in a tower, and it worked. And what is it? It's like a soccer ball. And they have panels of explosives where you would have each kind of, pentagon in a soccer or something. Each little pentagon around the soccer ball has got a panel of explosives. Outside that panel is a capacitor that, there's a blasting cap and a capacitor, kind of a shaped blasting cap that's gonna blow up all that charge all at once, right? Because what has to happen is you have to create a spherical shock wave all the way around that soccer ball, all at simultaneously, all at the same time, and it all has to crush the core. And what it's got is you're going to have like two different parts kind of in there, sort of. You have a critical mass and a subcritical mass, and you have to smash them together, and you have to have neutrons that kind of go in there And what it is 235. Uranium-235 is stable, right? It's a stable atom. It decays. It's a radioactive decay. It's a radioactive element. But 236 is unstable. When you do fission, and we talk about nuclear weapons, there's something called a fission bomb. I'm not going to teach you nuclear weapons. You can go to the Bellflower Center or Wikipedia and read about it. Fission is where a neutron hits a stable atom of uranium or some other atom, and it becomes unstable from that additional neutron. It becomes 236, and 236 is unstable. It splits into two. Those two products of the reaction are called the fission products, right? And they could be like cesium and barium or something, but and there'll be one other, and it could be like xenon or something like that. I don't know what they could. I think there's up to 4 of them from uranium. But so you got fission fission products, and you have to create a system. It's a bomb, but they call it a system, right? That creates the fission and the intense pressures and heat of a nuclear bomb, right? And it all has to be timed just right, and there's engineering that goes into that. That's why I say there's like $25-50 million of engineering and parts, maybe even more. I doubt it would be much more. You need a team of chemical engineers, materials engineers, physicists, applied mathematicians, people like that can kind of put it together and figure out what the fault lines are, because what you see in open source material is not enough to do it, probably. Right, you'd see, if it was enough to do it, Kim Jong-il would have done it a week after the guy in Pakistan talked about it, Abdullah Dir Khan, right? Dr. Khan was house arrest because he's talking about how to make nuclear bombs. If he had put out enough information, then we probably would have saw a nuclear test a week later, but probably there was enough, and he got in contact some way to milk that guy's brain and get enough. He's the kind of guy who could do that, right? He could penetrate the ISI with bribes, corruption, something to get his man in there to talk. He talked to somebody who knew something, who could listen to something or buy a tape or something. I'm not saying he got into Khan's house, but he could get some kind of media product out of there that could assist him. Some kind of consulting that probably wasn't, probably wasn't what he wanted to assist with, but people pick people's pockets when it comes to nuclear secrets. So anyways, you need, $50 million? And these people are bringing $500 million of cocaine, right? So the street value is $100,000. You buy it for $3,500. What's the markup on $500 million? Well, it's $97,000, a little less than $97,000 maybe, a little more than $97,000 of profit. So on every $100,000, you're sending the guy on the street is making 97, or not 97, but 80,000. Let's say there's 100,000 on the street. You sold it to him for 20,000. He makes 80,000. You made 16.5 on every kilo. So you figured out on 16.5 on every kilo, 10 of them would be 165,000, right? And 100 would be 1.65 million, right? So, and 10 of those would be 16 million, right? So the 100 times 10 is 1,000 kilos, right? So then 1,000 kilos times 3 would be 3,000 kilos to get you about 50 million profit, right? And since he's doing 5 times, so what did I say? 3,000 kilos. 3,000 kilos at $3,500, right? That's 1,000 times 3,000 is 3 million, right? And I said 3,500, so 3 times 3 million is close to $10 million in Dominican to buy what you need for a nuclear weapon. Just got to get it up here, and right, so then 5 times 10 million is for $50 million. you know, you need to find a buyer who can buy $50 million worth. Well, no, my numbers ain't right. They're not right. No, you need to make 50 million in profit, right? And to make 50 million, you need 10 times. You need $1 billion worth of cocaine is what it seems like. Street value, right? If it's powder, it's going to be around $70,000. If it's crack, it'd be over $100,000 on a kilo. But you need $1 billion worth of cocaine, and we definitely sell billions of dollars worth of cocaine, and people know there's billions of dollars worth of habits in this country. So is addiction a serious issue? Yeah, if we could keep people from using that shit, we wouldn't have the problem with the terrorists making a bunch of money to build nuclear weapons, right? And how do you do that? You either got to keep it out of the country, or somehow you need a cure for addiction. And we don't have a cure for that addiction. And how do you keep it out? Well, they say it all comes in the port and the border crossings, and I don't believe that, but they bring it in submarines a lot of times, and in other boats and airplanes, and sometimes they'll fly over the hood and they'll drop it out of the sky. They can use a drone just like we can. We have those drone swarms that we drop out of airplanes. They'll send the drone out, fly right into somebody's car or in the back of their pickup truck. They'll drive away. How are you going to stop that? Well, it's difficult to stop. You need a lot of high-tech support, right? Places like MIT, Caltech, Austin, Texas, Carnegie Mellon, they need to be thinking about fighting those drones. Also out in the desert, you put the autonomous thing out there and run through the desert with uranium. I know people say most of the drugs come in ports and stuff like that. That may be 100% true. I really don't know. I'm not down there checking. I look at the open source information. I'm skeptical of some things. I believe other things. What I do know is most of the nuclear weapons are not going to come through a port. Nuclear materials are not going to come through a port. People know that's a high risk for them, that if they buy something that costs them so much money, right? They had to find a buyer who had $1 billion to buy cocaine, and they made, nothing hardly, right? They made 50 million. They made $100 million on $1 billion. If they made $100 million on $1 billion worth of cocaine, they'd have enough, right? And probably, I'd use the conservatism principle, so I said they only had 50 million. Well, they probably could have made 100 million on $1 billion worth of coke. So, yeah, but they shoot people and do all kinds of nasty things to get their money back. Some of them are into getting their money back after they sell drugs. They want their money after they sell you some drugs, and then they want you to pay, then you want to pay some more, and they want to lie to you about how much you paid, blah, blah, blah. They play a lot of mind games in the drug game. And they're something pretty evil about what they do to people, right? They don't mind selling you and using you, and make you do prostitution for drugs, all kinds of things. But they need cold hard cash, not prostitution, to build nuclear weapons, unless they can make money off of a prostitute. So, or a porn star or something. So they're involved in a lot of illegal activity which has a negative effect on America. And they want to get a nuclear weapon in here and then run the country with Sharia law. And they want to run the county, the city, the courts, everything. And they put a nuclear weapon in Fort Pierce or Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. They'll tell the governor we're in charge. What are you going to do? They're going to bury it in the ground under their mosque or something. And if you fuck with them, they'll just blow the city up and they'll head for the hinterland. And they'll be in charge, I guess. That's blackmail, right? It's how are you going to disarm a nuclear weapon? You watch my video, EODWMD. You have to get the weapon, and then you have to disarm it somewhere safe before they blow it up. And if they're sitting on the keys to the controls underground, what are you going to do? I don't know, we fight that robot war with them and maybe we'll win. But You need a technical solution, probably. And what I would say is they can get enough money through drugs. When they're bringing in 250, 500 million, those are big hauls, but they're not the only $250 million hauls. Some of them are getting in the country. Obviously, if you look at the numbers, the economics, statistics on how much drugs is coming in the country, you'll see what I'm talking about. And overseas, they probably already have their design. They just have to spit it out of a 3D printer. And they may even have the parts ready in this country. All they need is the fissionable material to do final assembly or something, you know. I don't know what stage of development they are. They're pretty ambitious on a few things. I don't put it past them to blow up airliners so they can short the stock market to make money either. You know, why the president grounded airliners? I'm pretty sure it had something to do with the suspicions of terrorism. Right? There are people who stand to benefit if they know when the airline stock's going down. What it is it's pi day, guys. If you know what pi is an irrational number. It goes on forever. It's not 22/7, it's 3.14159, so on forever, right? Well, they use pi sometimes to verify that a computer's working correctly. What kind of computer? A supercomputer that's used for simulations, a high-performance computer that needs to calculate pi to a large number of decimals to verify, but normally you only need, what, a few hundred digits of pi to do anything substantial, right? But when you're trying to verify the processor's functioning and an array of processors used in a parallel computing system like a supercomputer, and verify an operating system for one of those systems, for a high-performance computer or cluster or something, you want it to calculate pi or something that's computer processor intensive, right? That it uses a lot of processor time, and you want to make sure that it makes accurate calculations. So you need a formula, and you'd audit the computer's ability to do that, because you simply can't sit there and measure it yourself. You can't observe it yourself. You have one computer check another computer, they cross-check each other. They'll say, what is the 700th digit of pi? Is it 6? And then another computer will say, no, it's 9. And another one says, it's 5. So you know you got a problem, right? That it's probably not right. Well, one of them's wrong. At least one's wrong. 2 could be wrong, and all 3 could be wrong. Unless I'm wrong, and it's one of those digits. I'm not sure what it is. I didn't calculate it. But you have a bunch of series that are all pi, right? Or supposedly pi, and you verify that these series are supposedly pi, and then you cross-reference them to each other as the computer calculates things, right? And the computer will verify with one register to another register, cross-referencing, or one address to another, where these solutions are stored, what the value of pi is at this digit to this digit to this digit. And these series, they check each other, right? So you have series 1 is pi, series 2 is pi, series 3 is pi, and they all converge to pi, right? They're not exactly pi, because it goes on for infinity, so it can only converge. Each series converges is probably the best, most accurate way to describe what a series of that approaches pi is, right? It's a convergence when you have these series 1 equals series 2 equals series 3, sorta, but they converge to each other. They're not exactly equal. They should be the same ultimately all the way out, but you won't know that. You can't calculate infinity. You can't add everything up from here to infinity, is what I'm trying to say. But there are people who verify those computers. When it comes to the airlines, they have in-flight management systems that help when the pilot is, incapacitated, the cockpit crew has been overtaken. There's a lot of things that an in-flight management system can do. If you're, it could give you a stall warning if you're stalling because the angle of attack of the aircraft is too high for the velocity of the aircraft. So it'll tell you to correct your angle of attack some way. They don't say correct your angle of attack, sir. No, they just say pull up, or whatever, you're nosing over or something like that, and they tell you what to do. And or they tell you to level out when your angle of attack's too high, you're aimed too high towards the sky, you don't get any lift off the wing, right? How's the wing work? It's curved on top, flat on the bottom. Velocity over the top is what? Faster than the velocity on the bottom, right? It's a longer distance over the top if it's a curve over the top. It's called the Bernoulli effect, right? It's how wings work. And planes work because they generate a difference in pressure, right? Which pushes the wing up and gives what's called lift, right? So the plane works that way. And in-flight management system, it could give you stall warnings and different kinds of alerts about instruments or controls or something, or something's wrong in how you're piloting the aircraft, and it could take over, I guess. And so they have to verify that, just like they verify supercomputers. They have a computer that tests the computers on the aircraft. They do what's called diagnostic tests of the in-flight management system and these other things that do stall warnings and things like that, right? So there's when I say in-flight management, I'm not a pilot, I run an airline, I don't know all that stuff, but I know there's a bunch of computers and there's some upgrades sometimes, right? Just like Norton utility for your security on your laptop, or just like Windows, they have upgrades, and if you upgrade them, what? Sometimes there's bugs, right? So one of the key things in that type of information processing, that type of data and programming, that data science and software engineering, is to make sure when you upgrade something there's not a lot of bugs, right? Because it's real important that the planes fly right? So they got these big computers that do a lot of simulations and try to test the processor in ways that verify that it's working correctly, right? And the operating system for the system, the in-flight management system, things like that. All those programs that go into the plane, they have to be validated, verified. They have to, detect all the bugs, right? And what kind of bugs are? There's compile errors. You can't have any of those. And you have, you have those logical errors where the program doesn't have any compile errors, but it doesn't do the right things, right? It says it's going to take over and do this, and it doesn't take over and do that, then something went wrong, right? It noses over or something like that, and maybe that's just a bug, but there could be people involved in creating those kind of faults, and they can create it by turning a wrench, right? They can inspire a mechanic somewhere to kill people on an airplane by turning a wrench, and they experiment sometimes with the aircraft to see what kind of faults they can introduce. These are the terror groups. And once they get a winning lottery ticket, they want to use it to kill people in America, right? So they experiment in Africa and over in Indonesia, and they work on the flight management system and the verification of their own systems through their standards and diagnostic testing agency for aviation. And they come up with their lottery ticket, their winning lottery ticket, where they can kill a bunch of Americans on an airliner. Then they inject that software into the system, and sometimes they leave it in there and say they removed it or something like that. It's real tricky what actually happens with software sometimes, right? Tracking changes and stuff, and that's one way, is through the software or some hardware change, right? They flop a drive, or they flop a processor, a good one for a bad one, or one that has what do they call it, BIOS or something that's corrupt or something, or has a virus where they can load something onto it that they normally couldn't load onto it. Or it could just be a guy who has a set of headphones on at the airport, and he's walking around turning his wrench, and the thing on his headphones tells him exactly what he's supposed to do. He could be unwitting, or he could be somebody who's witting, somebody who's not listening to IBM Watson. He's listening to his own version of Al-Qaeda Watson. And Al-Qaeda Watson is, modeled after IBM, so it looks like he's doing his job. But he turns the right wrenches and torques everything the right way, and the plane falls out of the sky, right? That's what artificial intelligence could do to your airplane, right? First, I talked about some of the, current issues when it comes to the border. Are they going to sneak uranium into Miami? There's a lot of port security, radiation detection, all that. I'm thinking they put it out there in the desert and drive it up through New Mexico or Arizona or something, where there's less border patrol. And, if they get a drone or something, they get it out in the desert, they can fly it from point to point, and a few grams at a time. Before you know it, they'll have their 5,000 grams, right? If we intercept, obviously we step up our enforcement. It'll be easier to justify things in Congress. My advice would be to send the Red Cell team with a special agent from FBI and CIA out there, and have them demonstrate how quickly they can move 5,000 grams in. And you don't have to move 5,000 grams of weapons grade uranium. All you have to move is like some kind of very low energy kind of, radioactive substance. It's not real dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Just something that represents the threat, right? You say, shielded it in a Coke can, and in actuality, none of this would be detected anyways based on the systems we have. But we put a Coleman lantern will be detected on a radiation detector. So we put Coleman lanterns inside of these things, and we flew one of them at a time through the desert of Arizona to this truck, and then we loaded them up and drove them to Chicago. And here's the designs we made in India. We flew those into Midway Airport. The guy handed his USB drive off in the airport. Somebody else drove out to a factory in Des Moines. They made everything and drove it back to Chicago, and we put it in top of the Sears Tower by doing this or that. And you have Navy SEALs and Delta Force and people like that assisting in every stage of the operation, as well as some Red Cell people from the National Nuclear Security Administration who understand the same things that the terrorists understand based on what they've collected on terrorists at CIA and DOE. So that would be my advice. As far as the airlines go, there are a lot of ways to make money, and every single way that a terrorist makes money is directed at some kind of big program. Either they want to blow up Mar-a-Lago, they want to blow up Air Force One, they want to blow up the White House or the Capitol, they want to hit the Pentagon again. They did it once, and they said if we did it once, we can do it again. So that's their goal, is to repeat history. They say history once forgotten is repeating, kind of thing, right? So they try to get everyone out here in Congress and in the public to forget about terrorism. It's not a threat. Bin Laden's dead. Obama won the war, right? Well, go ahead and think that way if you want, but you're not somebody I would think is responsible enough to make national security decisions. If you don't think the border is a threat, and you don't think drugs and narcotics in large volumes with a lot of money rolling in and out is a problem, then you're somebody who doesn't think rationally enough about national security to understand what I just said. Because it's not just that 70,000 people died, it's the potential that 12 million people could die in one nuclear explosion, or 1 million, or 2 million. That's a lot more than died at the Pentagon or in the World Trade Center. It was talking about 3,000 people, something like that, and a few hundred over at the Pentagon, and a lot of people was maimed and injured, but a lot more people would die, and a lot of people would get cancers and long-term health effects from a nuclear blast, ground zero, Manhattan, or Chicago, New York, LA, Houston, San Francisco, Seattle. Seattle got a lot of tech. Silicon Valley got a lot of tech. It'll level our tech industry, right? Austin has a lot of tech. There's Cambridge and Boston have a lot of tech. They'll level that. Carnegie Mellon, they had a lot of tech, robotics there, autonomous vehicles, things like that. Ford up in Detroit and all them, they will level those kind of places with one nuclear weapon that could do a lot of destruction. It's not worth gambling our future.